I want $1 million, and I believe that there are ways to get $1 million that I don't want to do. So what you're doing is saying, I want this, but I don't want this. And that's not a very powerful state of being, because you're setting contradiction up right away. So you soften that by saying, I want $1 million, and I want to find a way that is compatible with me to receive it.
Okay.
Now there's less resistance in that. You say, I want $1 million, and I know that there are a lot of people who have $1 million who got it in a way that would not be uncomfortable to me. But when you say, I want $1 million, but there's no one I'm going to inherit it from, or I want $1 million, but nobody that I know is going to die and leave it to me, or in other words, you've got to stop the contradiction. And so what we notice is, when you talk about what you want and why you want it, there's usually less resistance within you than when you talk about what you want and how you're going to get it. Because when you pose questions that you don't have answers for, like how, where, when, who, then it sets up a contradiction vibration within you that slows everything down.
Okay.
Statements such as, there must surely be many people on this planet today who have $1 million and in excess of it, who at one time were standing right where I am, just wanting it and having no idea how it was going to come. Feel how resistance-free that statement is. We want to say to you that words like faith and trust, which are so annoying on some levels, but we want to explain to you the value of them, because even though you don't know how or where or when or who, if you know what, and you've talked about why you want it, and you've practiced the thought of it until it's starting to feel very familiar to you, what begins to happen is things that couldn't happen to you now begin happening, and ideas that wouldn't even occur to you now begin to occur to you, and rendezvous with people that you don't have access to now begin to happen. And when your $1 million and many more come to you, you will wonder where it always was.
It seems like the resistance is so subtle. It's like it's somewhere in the background of the drama. You don't even recognize it.
Well, it's not so subtle. We wouldn't call it subtle. Well, maybe that's a good word for it, but we would use a more blunt word. And that is, I've practiced contradictory thoughts so long that they feel natural.
Okay.
And so when you start imagining having $1 million, and we're going to play here with you for just a little bit, but when you start imagining what that means, and we don't want you to just get $1 million and stop. You're going to want $1 million always at your disposal. You're going to want to spend that and have another on its heels, because we promise you, once you get used to millions of dollars moving through your experience, $1 million won't last you very long. Because you begin to live in a way, and your property taxes go way up. You say.
Well, I agree. That sort of dovetails into my next question. I have been creating phenomenally. I feel like the rockets of desire are going out really strong. I'm expecting it to come in, but when there's a delay in what my expectation when it's supposed to be here and when it actually does,
but do you see what you're doing?
I know.
You're taking score about the action journey, and if you could just accept that the action journey is none of your business, that's really what we'd like to say to you.
I feel overwhelmed about it.
We would like to say to you that how and where and when and who is not any of your business. It would be sort of like talking to someone who had the ability to grant you anything, and so you say, well, what I would like is $1 million, and the grantor says, it is done, and you say, well, how's it going to come? And the grantor says, that is not your concern. And you say, but wait, I've been planning on using this struggle to justify my existence. And the grantor says, no. All you have to do is ask. That's the only price you have to pay. You let the contrast produce within you the desire, and the desire is the asking, and that's as far as any earning has ever gone. In other words, how much do you pay for the most important parts of your day. What price do you pay for the sun coming up? None. What price do you pay for the water that moves about your planet and for the never-ending food that continues to grow? Do you know nobody's trucking in new supplies or resources or seeds from other places? In other words, you live in an abundant universe and you are paying no price for the true abundance, you see. And it's time for you to start looking around at the things that really, really matter. In other words, if somehow you went out today or the newspaper says, we only have 5 more days of air to breathe. Inconceivable, isn't it? You know that's not going to happen. The things that really, really matter, you're paying no price at all for. And if you will start paying no price at all for everything, you will be in the place that you were in when you were born. Think about it. You came into this little body and you couldn't even hold your head up. You had no teeth, hardly any hair. You didn't have an address or a social security number. In other words, really the basis of huge insecurity, wouldn't you think? Think about what it would be like if it was from your human perspective you were diving into life. You'd act like that like you do about death. Terrified of the unknown. But you weren't unknowing. You were trusting, because while you didn't know how it was going to happen or where it was going to happen or necessarily when, you didn't know the details, you know the basics. You know that well-being abounds. You knew that you are a worthy being. You knew that law of attraction would bring you everything. You knew that you had only to ask and it would be given. You came forth with such faith and confidence and eagerness and willingness to have the experience, and not one moment or sense of needing to pay some price. They taught that to you after you got here, and you've been trying to get over it ever since. You see?
Got it.
So when we talk about faith or trust, we're not talking about anything other than shoring up your resources as you look at and convince yourself again of the resources of this universe and the well-being that abounds. And when you practice, when you take the time to shift your emotion just a little bit on something that matters to you, and you consciously acknowledge, hey, I did that on purpose and I do feel better, and then you consciously acknowledge some shift in what comes as a result, you start getting very trusting about the laws. And it's easy to trust a law that doesn't wiggle around on you.